the beginning of a new broadcast week. We're on Monday through Friday, and have been on Monday through Friday pretty much ever since 1997. It's about 29 years now. And we did take 1 year hiatus back in around the turn of the century, but we've been doing this for 29 years. Anyway, we still have callers who call in, and that's what keeps us going. If you have questions about the Bible and you want to bring them up for conversation on the program, we'll talk to you about that. If you call, you can call to disagree with the host also. We don't mind at all. And you can call this number, 844-484-5737. The number again is 844-484-5737. One announcement coming up this week, tomorrow, actually. I'll be speaking tomorrow night in San Juan Capistrano in Southern California. I'll be talking on the subject of the 4 views of Revelation. Many of you know I wrote a book back in 1997 called Revelation 4 Views, a parallel commentary. It's been in print continuously by Thomas Nelson since that time. So it's been in print for, how long is that? About the same length as size of this show. So 29 years. Anyway, that book is still around. It's used as textbooks in Bible colleges a lot, from what I understand. Yet, there are very many people in the churches who do not know about the 4 views of Revelation. Only one view is very commonly known. And yet there are 3 others that are quite different and much more of long-standing than the popular view. The one that you know best is the one that's the newest. Just came up a couple of 100 years ago. Whereas there are other views of Revelation that were much more common and accepted by the evangelical world for many centuries before. And they still have reason to be considered. In my opinion, some of them are better attested than the one that's most popular that you may have heard and that I heard all my life. Anyway, I'm going to talk about those 4 views tomorrow night in San Juan Capistrano at a church called Ranch Church. Now, the talk is from 6 to 8. There'll be a short break in the middle, but 6 o'clock tomorrow night till 8. But they are serving food to people who will register in advance. It doesn't cost anything, but just you have to kind of email them or contact them, let them know you plan to come. And at 5:30, they'll be serving a meal for those who have registered. So if you want to do that, just check out our website, thenarrowpath.com. Go into announcements, the tab that says announcements, and go down to tomorrow's date, which is February 10th, and you'll see how you can register, let them know you're coming. And then we'll see you tomorrow there in Southern California. And so I don't have anything more to announce, so we're going to go to the phones now and talk to Robert in Brunswick, New York. Robert, welcome to the Narrow Path. Thanks for calling.
Good evening. I must first profess with the fact that I'm vision impaired.
Okay.
That's why I can't go to the Bible and look for the answer for what I'm asking you about. I still want to know whether for a Christian marriage to be valid, must be officiated by a pastor or a minister or a priest.
Did you say baptism to be valid?
No, a marriage.
Marriage to be valid. Okay, yeah, I couldn't catch the first part of your sentence very well. For marriage to be valid, does it have to be done by a priest or a minister? Well, there's nothing in the Bible that say that. The Bible doesn't say anything about what constitutes a marriage except the assumption that everyone had was that it's a covenant relationship made between 2 parties. Now, in the Bible, especially in the Old Testament, we see this was usually arranged between the family of the bride and the family of the groom. And, Jewish times, they probably had a rabbi who was overseeing it. But before Jewish times, like Abraham's time, for example, it was simply a matter of witnesses watching the man and the woman say, you are my husband, you are my wife. And that was their way of taking vows in the time of Abraham. We don't have record of that in the Bible. We just know that from history, from records of ancient Mesopotamia and so forth. But there is no example of a wedding in the Bible. There's no prescription of how it has to be done. but it was not, generally speaking, something that was, for example, a state licensed thing, as it is so often today. I'm sure that the Roman Empire and other pagan empires had ways that they licensed the marriages that they conducted, but before there were any, such secular powers to do it, God had instituted marriage, and it was, generally speaking, an agreement between the families, the bride and the groom. I'm sure that once religious institutions like Judaism and the church and so forth became established, it became customary for those within those institutions to conduct their vows before, the congregations, before the community, before the families, and probably with a religious officiant, like I said, a rabbi. Today, Jews would use a rabbi. Most Christians use a minister or a priest. Now, does that mean that that is a biblical requirement? Well, apparently not, because there were marriages long before there were rabbis and before there were ministers. So, from the time of Adam and Eve and on, there were people who got married. So, marriage is not primarily defined by a religious ceremony, though there's nothing wrong with the religious ceremony. I think it's a very helpful thing. I think it's a very important thing, actually, for the vows to be taken before witnesses, because those witnesses are there to keep you accountable, to keep your vows. It's always tempting to break your promises when it's hard to keep them. And, if no one heard you make them except you and the person you promised to, then, a dishonest person, and probably many people, most people probably sometimes are tempted to be dishonest. A dishonest person might just walk out on their vows, but the idea is that there are witnesses, there's family members. In the case of Christians, there's the body of Christ who's been, witness those vows and who's to hold you accountable to them. But as far as whether the person who officiates at the wedding is a minister or not, there's nothing in the Bible that requires that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for your call. God bless you. Larry in Kent, Washington, welcome to the Narrow Path.
Yeah, hey Steve, good talking to you again. Oddly enough, I got another marriage question. Maybe it's the season coming up or something, but my question was in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, 36, 37, 38, where it says, if you are firmly established in your heart and you have your desire under control, you can keep your betrothed as a betrothed. But then he who marries the betrothed does well, and he who refrains from marriage will do even better. But does this mean that I always thought betrothed meant be engaged to? But does this sound like something you can be engaged to for a while without marrying somebody?
Well, it's not. Yeah, it's not the easiest thing in the world to know whether Paul is addressing the father of the bride or the groom of the bride when he says, if a man will keep his virgin. Well, I don't know what translation you're reading, but in the Greek it says if a man wants to keep his virgin, is fine. He that keeps his virgin is fine. He who marries her is okay too. The idea is it's rather unclear whether it's talking about the father who decides not to keep his bride. And I think in the context of the chapter, it's more likely he's talking about the betrothed, the groom, because he is talking about the virtues and the advantages of remaining single, which would be a virtue that comes upon the bride and the groom by remaining single instead of getting married,
right?
More than the father. So it's hard to exactly what Paul's saying. Of course, earlier he says, for the time. He says, because of the present crisis, because of the present, what is the word he uses in this translation? I think distress. Verse 26. Let me just read verse 25 and 26. Now, concerning virgins, I have no commandment from the Lord. Okay, so there's liberty about this. He's just, I'm going to give my judgment or my opinion about as one whom the Lord has mercy on, has shown his mercy to make me work trustworthy. Okay, he says, I suppose that this is good. Because of the present distress, that it is good for a man to remain as he is. Now, there's some present distress he has in mind. Now, whether that was a local situation or something that we don't know about, or whether he just means the whole distress of this present life, it could be that, because he goes on to say in verse 33, he who is married cares about the things of the world, how he may please his wife. But of course he says, and before that he says, he that is unmarried cares for the things that belong to the Lord, how he may please the Lord. Paul is saying it's okay to get married, but he thinks that if people can handle it, single life, if they can stay pure, if they can, if they can overcome temptations and so forth and stay pure, it's a wonderful advantage to not have the responsibilities of a family. So you can, he says, spend your whole time doing things that, promote the things of God. Now, he's not disparaging marriage. When he says, well, a man who gets married, he's got to care about the things of the world, how they please his wife. By the things of the world, he doesn't mean bad things. He just means, a home and, clothing and for children and the kinds of things that become more of an obligation, more of a responsibility that ties the person down. And so Paul is he's not requiring, but he's encouraging people who can to stay single. So in the context of the passage you mentioned, the man who has self-control and wants to keep his virgin, as Paul puts it, is very probably the guy who is engaged. He's writing to people about staying single, but of course many of his readers are already betrothed. And a betrothal, I don't know about Corinth, because that was a Greek city, but I know in the Jewish culture, which Paul was from, betrothal was made with an oath. It was not just, hey, will you marry? Okay, let's tell people we're going to get married. It was rather, it's like a marriage covenant. It's just they didn't move in together yet, but it was kind of a solemn promise, and you didn't break it unless you had grounds for divorce. So a man who'd made such a promise should keep it, unless he can. I guess what Paul is saying is if he can keep his virgin, if he can support her without, actually getting married. Now that doesn't seem very fair to her if she was being married and have kids. So. I think that Paul may be talking about a brief period of time. I don't think, he says because of the present distress. I don't know what he means by that. Nobody knows what he means by that. And there may be a situation he's saying, at the moment, you might want to just stay single as long as you can because of this present situation. But who knows when the present situation is over? Maybe he was thinking, and then it'd be a better time to get married than now. So just keeping her as a virgin and waiting to get married could be even what he has in mind. It's not clear. This is a great example of how we look at epistles, because Paul and Peter and James and John wrote epistles to people whom they knew personally, whose circumstances they knew personally. And whose situation, stuff, and culture they knew personally, so they could make allusions to things that the readers would understand immediately. But we're reading it 2,000 years later. We're not familiar with all of the circumstances they were in. And we're saying, how do we make sense of this? And this is one thing we always have to remember when we're reading the epistles. We are reading somebody else's mail. And just like listening to one side of a telephone conversation and not hearing the other side, you kind of have to deduce, if you can, what the context is of the statements made. And sometimes that's easy. And sometimes it doesn't really matter the context, because some things that Paul or Peter write are just universal theological truths that aren't, that are not circumstantially governed. But when he gives advice, sometimes he does allude to things and people's names. They give people's names that we don't know and what they're doing. And we have to realize, okay, this is not really written directly to us. And the advantage we get is when we can apply, what he said to some other group to a situation that's similar in our own case. But once in a while, you've got situations like this where it's not entirely clear. Is Paul talking about a temporary, hold off on getting married for maybe a few months or years? Or is he talking about, go single the rest of your life? They would understand the circumstances he's referring to, and we don't. And we just have to live with that fact sometimes. It's like later on in chapter 15 where he talks about those who are baptized for the dead. We don't really have any certainty what he's referring to, but he knew, and so did his readers. They knew some people who were being baptized for the dead. We don't know anyone who does that except the Mormons. But I'm not sure that he's referring to the same practice that the Mormons practice. But the thing is that, we just don't know. But they did. And this is one of those things that I have had to live with, just being uncertain exactly what it meant. But the principle of the chapter is, of course, applicable and understandable. Namely that, if you have the grace to stay single and pure and just serve God with all your energy without the distraction of family, more power to you. But if you don't, and he starts this right at the beginning of the chapter, he said it's great that a man would not touch a woman, but to avoid fornication, let every man have his own wife and every woman her own husband. So he said, he's kind of urging people who can do it to stay single and pure. But he also admits that not everyone has that gift, as he calls it. He says to one is given one gift, and to another a different gift, meaning the gift of being celibate or not. That's verse 7. But so throughout the thing, he's not trying to put down marriage or discourage marriage, but he is saying if you can handle celibacy and not be overwhelmed with temptations, that you're in a good spot to serve God without distraction. And that statement about the man keeping his virgin is in that context somehow. And while it's not entirely clear what keeping the virgin means, whether he means, okay, you were going to get married 2 months from now, but because of the present distress, maybe you should wait a couple of years, and just keep her as a virgin that long if you can control yourself. That could be what he means. Or he could be talking about something more long-term. It's just not entirely clear. But the principle, of course, is not too difficult to understand. That's, of course, the principle is covering his whole instructions. Yeah. Okay? Okay. Well, thank you. Okay, Larry. God bless you. Good talking to you. John from Phoenix, Arizona. Welcome to the Narrow Path.
Hey, Steve. How you doing?
Good.
All right. Hey, I emailed you over the weekend. Thanks for getting back to me. I'm still kind of a little foggy about the issue I emailed you about. It was about reading in the New Testament that Abraham was justified on several occasions. And, in today's Protestant teachings, we kind of assume that, justification is a one-time shot. And it kind of comes with a new birth. And, you wouldn't be justified on an ongoing basis or a lifelong journey. And I agree with what you said, that it's kind of a ongoing thing as long as our faith stays alive. You explain versus what you got to talk about other calendars and titles.
Abraham, it says Abraham in Genesis 15:6 that when God told him his descendants would be as the stars in the heavens, it says Abraham believed the Lord and it was counted him for righteousness. So that's the first time we read specifically in Genesis of Abraham's faith or of justification. Now, in Hebrews, of course, his faith, and Romans 4 and Hebrews 11, Paul is also commended for his faith in trusting that God would allow Sarah to have a baby when they were too old to have babies. And in Hebrews 11, it talks also, especially about when he offered Isaac, that was a great demonstration of his faith. Now, the term justification, it is applied in both those places. Because in Romans 4, when it talks about, when he was told that children, yet he believed and hoped against hope and, all of that, it says, therefore, it was counted him for righteousness. What this is mentioned is these are illustrations of the kind of faith Abraham had. I think maybe some people are trying to say, okay, what do I have to get to heaven? Just tell me, I'll do it. Okay, do I have to, do I have to say this prayer? Do I have to get baptized? Do I have to, confess something? What thing do I have to do to be saved? And there's not some one thing. It's a relationship with God. Abraham had that relationship with God, which was a trusting relationship, which was demonstrated in many parts of his life. When God told him things about his descendants that seemed impossible to a man his age, he believed him. When God told him to offer up his son, and all would be well, Abraham believed him and obeyed. The point here is that these are just illustrations that punctuate the life of Abraham, but really were true of him at all times. These were times when his faith was made visible to people reading his story. But the days in between those incidents, he had faith too. He was a man of faith, and it's his faith that made him right in the sight of God. So it's not that, I realize that there is a point in time when a person first puts faith in God, when they first learn of God or first surrender to God and put their faith in God. There's that point in time when they are first justified. But it's not a punctiliar thing that happens one time, and then you have to kind of do it again once in a while to make sure you're renewing your membership or something. It's rather when you are justified, when you are converted, you become a follower of Jesus, and that's for life. That's not, well, I'm trying this for a while, see how this works out, see if it's better than my other, hobbies, No, you don't get saved unless you come all the way in. You jump into the deep end, and you're in it for life. And a lot of people think they're going to just try it out. And, they'll believe in Jesus at this moment, if that means I get saved. And then someone will tell them, there are some people who tell you, and if you just do that one time, then you're saved forever. It doesn't matter what you do after that. It's the once saved, always saved idea. But, of course, the Bible doesn't teach that. But the point is, when you get saved, you become a child of God. You become a disciple of Jesus. You become bought with a price. You're owned by God. You're his servant for life, and you're his child for life, and for eternity. And, and so you live your life, a life of faith in God, and you live your life under the umbrella of being justified by God, by your faith. It's not that the prodigal son comes home and he gets justified, and then he goes back to the pig sty, and then comes back and gets justified again every once in a while, goes back to the pigsty. No, he comes home and stays home. He comes home to a right relationship with his Father, and he lives in that relationship with him, and all is well with him and his Father. I think many people see Christianity or their Christian life as once in a while they'll check in with God and see if he's still interested in forgiving them for the way they've been living in between. That's not, and people like that are not converted. I mean, that's not what conversion is. Conversion is a change. Conversion is a redirect of your whole life. It's not just a tryout. You don't just test drive Jesus and decide if you're going to buy him. Until you buy him, you don't drive him. He's just not yours until you are his. So Abraham's faith is mentioned many times, and it's mentioned many times in connection with his justification. James also, of course, mentions that when he offered Isaac, he was showed his faith was justified him. So Abraham is remembered primarily as a man of faith, but not because he did one or two or three things that showed his faith. Those are the things that showed what he was all the time. He was a man devoted to trusting God. And there are several incidents in his life where this comes to the fore, particularly, and these are mentioned by different New Testament writers. But he's only justified because he is a man of faith, not because he had faith on that occasion, and then Jesus, God forgave him of his sins that time, but then didn't forgive him again until the next time he believed. Faith is a way of life. Trusting God is a relationship with God, and that's the only kind of life with God that the Bible knows about in the Old or the New Testament. The people who were saved were the people who had this kind of total life with God. They were devoted to God and trusted him. Old Testament and New Testament. And there's just no other kind of salvation known in the Bible. So it's not, you've written me a couple times about this, and like I said, it's not that he got justified on that occasion, that occasion, that occasion. Rather, he lived his life under the covering of God's approval and justification, which means God says you're okay with me. Why? Because he lived his life of faith. And the incidents you talk about are simply moments where that was manifested in his experience.
Well, that's really good. I appreciate it, Sarah. Thank you.
Okay, John, good talking to you. Thanks for joining us.